Chapter 17. What Happened at the Ranch. It was after midnight when Mr. Howard was rudely awakened. The bright moon shining through the windows lit up the interior of the cabin, and he easily recognized young Matt standing by the bed with Pete, who was sleeping at the ranch that night nearby. "Why, Matt, what's the matter?" exclaimed the shepherd, sitting up. He could not see that the big fellow's clothes were torn, that his hat was gone, and that he was dripping with perspiration, but he could hear his labored breathing. Strong as he was, the young giant was nearly exhausted by the strain of his race over the mountains. "Get up quick, Dad. I'll tell you while you're putting on your clothes," the woodsman answered, and while the shepherd dressed, he told him in a few words and finished with, "Call Brave inside and get your gun, with all the shells that you can find. Don't light a light for a minute. They'll be here any time now, and it'll be a good bit yet before Sammy can get home." He began fastening the front door. The peaceful-minded scholar could not grasp the meaning of the message. It was to him an impossible thought. "You must be mistaken, Grant. Surely you're excited and unduly alarmed. Wash Gibbs has no reason to attack me." Young Matt replied gruffly, "I ain't making no mistake in the woods, Dad. You ain't in the city now, and there ain't no one that can hear you holler. Don't think I'm scared neither, if that's what you mean, but there's 10 of them up in that bunch, and they're bad ones. You better call Brave, sir. He'll be some help when it comes to the rush." But the other persisted. Surely you're mistaken, lad. Why would anyone wish to harm me? Those men are only out fox hunting or something like that. If they should be coming here, it's all a mistake. I can easily explain." "Explain hell!" ejected the mountaineer. "I ask your pardon, Dad, but you don't know, not being raised in these woods like me. Old man Lewis hadn't done nothing neither, and he explained too, only he never got through explaining. They ain't got no reason, they're just drunk, and you've never seen Wash Gibbs drunk, and tonight he's got his whole gang with him. I don't know why they're coming after you, but from what you told me about his stopping here this evening, and what I've heard lately, I can guess. I know what he'll do when he gets here if we don't stop him. It'll be all the same to you whether he's right or wrong." Brave came trotting into the cabin through the rear door and lay down in his corner by the fireplace. "Well, that's funny," said young Matt, and then as quickly he glanced around. "Where's Pete?" The boy had slipped away while the two men were talking. Stepping outside, they called several times, but save the "ooh, ooh, ooh" of an owl in a big tree near the corral, there was no answer. "Well, the boy's all right anyway," said the young man. "Nothing in the woods ever hurt Pete. He's safer there than he would be here. I'm glad he's gone, actually." The shepherd didn't reply. He seemed not to hear, but stood as though fascinated by the scene. He still could not grasp the truth of the situation, but the beauty of the hour moved him deeply. "What a marvelous, what a wonderful sight," he said at last in a low tone. "I do not wonder the boy loves to roam the hills at nights like this. Take a look, Grant. See how the soft moonlight falls on that patch of grass on this side of the old tree over yonder, and how black the shadow is under the brush, like the mouth of a cave. A witch's cave, no doubt. I'm sure there's ghosts and goblins in there, with fairies and gnomes, and perhaps a dragon or two. And see, lad, how the great hills they rise into the sky. How grand and beautiful the world is. It's good to live, Matt. Though life be sometimes hard, still it's good to live." At the old scholar's words and manner, the mountaineer, too, forgot for a moment the thing that brought him there, and a look of awe and wonder came over his rugged features as the shepherd, with his face turned upwards and his deep voice full of emotion, repeated, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth the knowledge." The owl left his place in the old tree and flew across the moonlit clearing into a deeper gloominess of the woods. And inside the cabin the dog barked, and though the still night, from down the valley where the ranch trail crossed the creek came the rattle of horses' feet on the rocky floor of the little stream and the faint sound of voices. Young Matt started, and again the man of the wilderness was master of the situation. "They're coming, Dad. We ain't got no time to lose now." Re-entering the cabin, Mr. Howitt quieted the dog while his companion fastened the rear door, and in the silence, while they waited, a cricket under the corner of the house sang his plaintive call. The sound of voices grew louder as the horses drew nearer, and Brave growled and would have barked again, but was quieted by the shepherd, who was crouching by his side with one hand on the dog's neck. The older man smiled to himself. It all seemed to him so much like a child's game. He was watching the mountaineers' preparations with amused interest, and had followed the young woodsman's directions even to the loaded shotgun in his hand, as one would humor a boy in his play. The scholar's mind, trained to consider the problems of civilization and to recognize the dangers of the city, refused to entertain seriously the thought that there, in the peaceful woods in the dead of night, a company of ruffians would seek to do him harm. The voices had ceased, and the listener heard only the sound of the horses' feet as the party passed the ruined cabin under the bluff. A moment or two later, the rider stopped in front of the ranch house. Brave growled again, but was silenced by the hand upon his neck. Young Matt was at the window. "I see them," he whispered. "They're getting off their horses, and they're tying them to the corral fence now." The smile on the shepherd's face vanished, and he experienced a queer sensation. It was as though something was gripping his heart. The other continued his whispering report. "They're bunching up now under the old tree. They're talking things over. Don't know what to make of the dog not being around, I reckon. Well, now they're taking a drink. It takes a lot of whiskey to help 10 men jump an old man, and him a stranger in the woods. Now Wash is sending 2 of them up around the back so that you can't slip out in the brush. Hush now. Here come a couple more to try the front door." He slipped quietly across the room to the shepherd's side. The visitors came softly up to the front door and tried it gently. A moment later, the rear door was tried in the same way. "Let Brave speak to them," whispered Matt, and the dog, feeling the restraining hand removed, barked fiercely. Mr. Howitt, following his companion's whispered instructions, spoke aloud. "What's the matter, Brave?" A bold knock on the front door caused the dog to redouble his efforts until his master commanded him to be still. "Who's there?" called the shepherd. "Young Matt took terribly bad," answered a voice. "They want you to come on up to the house and doctor him." A drunken voice came from the old tree, followed by a smothered oath. The giant at Mr. Howitt's side growled under his breath. "Oh, sick, am I? That's them there'll be a heap sicker before morning. Just keep on talking, Dad. We gotta get all the time we can get so Jim can get here." The shepherd called again. "I can't say I recognize your voice, sir. Perhaps you can tell me who you are?" Outside there was a short consultation, followed by a still louder knock. "Open up! Why don't you open up and see who we are?" While from under the tree came a call. "Quit your fooling around and bring him out here, you fellers." This command was followed by still more rigorous hammering at the door and the threats. "Open up, old man! Come on, open up or we'll bust her in." Mr. Howitt whispered to his companion. "Well, let me open up the door and talk to them, Grant. Surely they'll listen to reason." But the woodsman returned. "Talk to a nest of rattlers. Jim Lane's the only man that can talk to them now. We got to stand them off as long as we can." As he spoke, he raised his revolver and was about to fire a shot through the door when a slight noise at one side of the room attracted his attention. He turned just in time to catch a glimpse of a face that was withdrawn from one of the little windows. The noise at the door ceased suddenly, and they heard two men running to join the group under the tree. "Well, they found out you're not alone," whispered the big fella, springing to the window again. And as a drunken yell came from the visitors, he added, "Seems like they're some excited about that, too. They're holding a regular powwow over there. What do you figure they're thinking? Hope they'll keep it up till Jim... Oh, shh, here comes another. That ornery Jim Ball from the mouth of Indian Creek." The man approached the cabin, but stopped some distance away and called, "Hello, old man." "Well, what do you want?" answered Mr. Howitt. "Who's that feller you got in there with you?"
"Well, it's a friend."
"Well, yeah, we kind of allowed it was a friend, and we all want to see him powerful bad. Can't he come out and play with us, mister?" Another laugh came from the group under the tree. Young Matt whispered, "Keep him talking, Dad." Mr. Howitt called, "Well, he don't really seem like playing tonight. Perhaps you could come back tomorrow." At this, the spokesman dropped his bantering tone. "Now look here, old man. We ain't got time to be fooling around. We know who that feller is, and we're going to have to take him. He's been sneaking around this neighborhood long enough. And as for you, mister, we allowed your health to be something better where you come from, and we aim to help you leave this neck of the woods right sudden. Now open up and turn that feller over to us, and we'll let you off easy like. But if you don't, we'll bust in that door and make you both dance to the same tune. And there won't be an area thing that you can dance under, neither." The old shepherd was replying kindly when his speech was interrupted by a pistol shot and a command from the leader, at which the entire gang charged towards the cabin, firing as they came, making the little valley hideous with their drunken oaths and yells. From his window young Matt coolly emptied his revolver, and even as the crowd faltered, there came from their leader another volley of oaths.
Go on," yelled Wash. "Their guns are empty now. Fetch 'em out before they can load again."
With an answering yell, the others responded, and carrying a small log, they made for the cabin at full speed. One crashing blow, the door flew from its hinges, and the opening was filled with the drunken, sweating, swearing crew. The same instant, young Matt dropped his useless revolver, and springing forward, met them on the threshold. The old shepherd, who had not fired a shot, could scarcely believe his eyes as he saw the giant catch the nearest man by the shoulder and wrist, and lifted him high above his head, and fling him with terrific force full into the faces of his bewildered companions. Those who were not knocked down by the strange weapons scattered in every direction, crouching low, and for a moment the big fellow was a master of the situation, and, standing alone in the doorway in the full light of the moon, was easily recognized.
"Hello, boys, it's young Matt himself,"
yelled the one who had raised a laugh by saying that young Matt was sick and the shepherd was waiting to doctor him. "Yeah, it's me, Bill Simpson, and I'm sure ailing tonight. I'm needing to go to some doctor real powerful," returned the giant. "Well, we never knew it was you," whined the other, carefully lengthening the distance between the big man on the doorstep and himself. "No, I reckon not. You all planned to find an old man alone and do for him like you done for others. A fine lot you are, 10-1, and him not even knowing the woods." And while he was speaking, the men slowly retreated to gather about their big leader under the tree, two of them being assisted by their companions and one other limping painfully. Young Matt raised his voice. "I know you, Wash Gibbs, and I know this here is your dirty work. You've been bragging about what you do when you meet up with me, and I'm here right now. Why don't you just come up here like a man? Come on out here in the light and let me and you settle this right now. You all..." A jet of flame leapt out of the shadow, and the speaker dropped like a log. With a cry, the shepherd ran to the side of his friend, but in a moment the crowd again had reached the cabin, and the old man was dragged from his fallen companion. With all of his strength, Mr. Howitt struggled with his captors, begging them to let him go to the boy, but his hands were bound tightly behind his back, and when he was still pleading with those who held him, Wash Gibbs struck him full in the mouth, a blow that brought blood. They were leading the stunned and helpless old man away when someone, who was bending over young Matt, exclaimed, "You missed him, Wash. Just racked him. He'll be up in a minute, and there'll be hell to pay in the wilderness if he ain't died. Better fix him up quick." The big fellow already showed signs of returning to consciousness, and by the time they'd tied his arms, he was able to struggle to his feet. For a moment he looked dizzily around, his eyes turning from one evil triumph face to another, until they rested upon the bleeding countenance of his old friend. The shepherd's eyes smiled back a message of cheer, and the kind old man tried to speak, when Wash Gibbs made another threatening motion with his clenched fist. At this, a cry like a roar of a maddened bull came from the young giant, and in his rage he seemed suddenly endowed with almost superhuman strength. Before a man of the startled company could do more than grasp with astonishment, he had shaken himself free from those who held him, breaking the rope by which he was bound as though it was twine, and had leapt to the shepherd's side. But it was of no use. For a moment no one moved, and then a crashing blow from the butt of a rifle in the hands of a man in the rear of the two prisoners sent young Matt once more to the ground. When he again regained consciousness, he was so securely bound that even with his great strength he was helpless. Leading their captives to the old tree, the men withdrew for a short consultation, and to refresh themselves with another drink. When they had finished, Gibbs addressed the two friends. "We didn't aim to hurt you, young Matt, but seeing how you're so thick here with this fella, and appear to know so much about him, I reckon we can't help ourselves nohow." He turned to the shepherd. "There's been too much much funny business at this here ranch since you come, mister, and we'ns allow that we'll just give you a warning that we don't want no more strangers snooping round this neighborhood, and we don't aim to have 'em either. We'ns allow we can take care of ourselves without any help of them government." The shepherd tried to speak, but Gibbs, with an oath, roared, "Shut up, I tell you, just shut up. I've been watching, and I know what I know. You fix them there ropes, boys, and we'll get through moseying along now. Ain't no use palaverin' now." A rope was thrown over a limb above their heads, and a man approached the shepherd with the noose. Young Matt struggled desperately, and with an evil grin, Gibbs said, "Don't you worry, sonny, you're going too." And at his signal another rope was fixed, and the noose was placed over the young man's head. The men took their places, awaiting the word from their leader. The shepherd spoke softly to his companion. "Thank you, my boy." The giant began another desperate struggle. Wash Gibbs, raising his hand, opened his lips to give the signal, but no word came. The brutal jaw dropped. The ruffian's eyes fairly started from his head, while the men who held the rope stood as if turned to stone, as a long, wailing cry came from the dark shadows under the bluff. There was a moment of death-like silence, and then another awful sobbing groan, rising from a blood-curdling scream, and came down from the road, and from the direction of the ruined cabin advanced a ghostly figure. Through the deep shadows and misty light it seemed to float towards them, moaning and sobbing as it came. A shuddering gasp of horror burst from the frightened crew under the tree, and then, at a louder wail from the approaching apparition, they broke and ran. Like wild men they leapt for their horses, flung themselves into their saddle, and fled in every direction. Young Matt and the shepherd sank onto the ground in helpless amazement. As the outlaws fled, the spectre paused, Then it started onward towards the two men, and again it hesitated, and for a moment it remained motionless and then turned and vanished, just as Jim Lane came flying out of the timber into the bright light of the little clearing. End of chapter 17.